Welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman, a podcast loaded with practical tips, powerful scripts, personal stories, and simple steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. So get ready to get the information you need to make the impact you want from someone you trust, your friend, parenting expert, Dr. Robyn Silverman.
Hello and welcome to How to Talk to Kids About Anything, where we give you the tips, scripts, stories, and steps to make even the toughest conversations easier. I'm so honored to be your host, Dr. Robyn Silverman, child and teen development specialist, author, and speaker, and most importantly, parent of two great kids who give me the opportunity to love, learn, and grow every single day, whether I want to or not. Believe me, I get it. It's not always easy, but we're in this together, and we have some great people helping us along the way. Now, talking about race and racism isn't easy. There are a lot of questions that we may not know how to answer while we're in the moment, and many situations that we may not know how to handle when we are in them. We also may be confused about how to raise children who are true allies and who are willing to step up, have tough conversations, not only do what's right in the moment, but also what could be helpful in the long run as we strive for lifelong relationships and life-changing opportunities for growth. How do we ensure that we do better and embrace a willingness to engage in courageous discomfort as we dive into our questions about race and racism? For this, we have two amazing women on today, Shanterra McBride and Rosalind Wiseman. Shanterra McBride is a Texas-based author, preacher, speaker, and teacher. She is the founder of Marvelous University, a social enterprise that offers life coaching and success planning for young people, specializing in leadership development for girls and young women. Shanterra was awarded the Profiles in Leadership Award from SMU for having made a significant impact on the quality of life of girls and women all over the country. She is the author of Love Your Jiggle, The Girl's Guide to Being Marvelous, an inspirational book for girls ages 11 to 17. And she is the co-author of Courageous Discomfort, Conversations about Race and Racism with Rosalind Wiseman. Now, Rosalind Wiseman is a Colorado-based speaker and best-selling author, perhaps best known for Queen Bees and Wannabes, helping your daughter survive cliques, gossip boyfriends, and the new realities of Girl World, the basis of the hit movie and Broadway musical Mean Girls. She has authored several other parenting books, including Masterminds and Wingmen and the Owning Up curriculum, which I have. Fabulous. Rosalind is a regular contributor for National Public Radio, the New York Times, and for the Today Show and other national media, and has been on our podcast now twice before talking about bullying and social aggression, as well as getting granular in really tough conversations. Definitely check those out. Shanterra and Rosalind are graciously here to talk about their book, Courageous Discomfort. So welcome to both of you to How to Talk to Kids About Anything.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're
very
here.
Much.
You're so welcome. Yay. Yay. So before we dive into everything, for those who haven't had the opportunity to meet you, to read your book, get to know what you're all about, can you tell us maybe one really interesting tidbit about you, like maybe what gets you up in the morning, or, what really drives you? And how did you wind up writing a book together on race and racism?
Well, I'll start. What gets me up in the morning is coffee. Mm-hmm. And so I start my day with coffee and Peloton. I have a tread that I like to use, and I get that. Those are the things that I do let me stop. In the morning.
In the morning. Shanterra, do you have a favorite person on the Peloton?
Yes, she does.
I do. I love Dr. Chelsea Jackson Roberts. And so she's my yoga person. And on the tread, I love Jocelyn Thompson Rule. Right, and I do a lot of classes from folks across the pond. I love listening to them. And I'm like, I'm moving to England.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it is a pleasant accent to listen to. It's true.
It really is.
It really is. Okay. And Rosalind, what kind of gets you up in the morning, or so what's a tidbit about you before we get into the answer to how in the world did you wind up writing this book together?
Well, I will tell you something that Shanterra knows, of course, but not many people know, which is
Okay.
that it doesn't get me up in the morning, but pretty much every day now I am going to dance classes. So,
Hey,
so in the
wow.
last couple of years, last 2 years, I think, right? It's about the last 2 years.
Mhm.
I started off by doing it because I wanted to, but it was really uncomfortable. And now I go all the time, all the
Mhm.
What
time,
kind of
like
dance
four,
class is
4 days
it?
a week. All
Wow.
different kinds. One time Shanterra came with
did.
me to one of my classes
Ah.
when we were working on Courageous Discomfort together, and she came to Boulder so we could write together. So she came to one of my classes that was sort of like maybe a little hip hop,
Mhm.
I don't know, sort of like that. But I also do all different kinds of classes that
Wow.
are really grounding for me and really
Amazing.
super helpful to me. So yeah, that's something that I'm doing. That's
This
not
is
necessarily
awesome.
always in the morning, but definitely
Hey,
new for me.
that
Yeah.
is so interesting. My son is now taking hip hop. That's really amazing. And I think people who dance are extraordinary because it's not my it's not where I
Yeah.
sit. I mean, I would
Yeah.
like to. I'm a performer, and so I pushed myself about 2 years ago too to start my voice lessons again. And so for me, it's like voice, then acting, then dancing was always like,
Mhm.
I had to rate them when you were trying
Yeah.
out for a musical. And I was like,
Mhm.
dancing
Mhm.
number 3. But I think that's really amazing. Okay, so what got you guys to write this book together? It's definitely a challenging book to I'm sure have written, and it asks the readers to be courageous and jumping in. So what got you writing that book together?
Well, I would say in the summer of 2020, when we were in the middle of a pandemic, several unarmed people, Black people, were killed by police. It was
Mhm.
there were protests going all over around the world. And Ross and I have a friendship and a relationship where I could text her and say, "You wouldn't believe what somebody who looks like you just said to me." Because
Mm.
it was I knew white people specifically were trying to absolve their feelings, and it was weird. It was weird for them. And they would ask, "Can I send you flowers?" And this truly happened. Like, "Can I buy you dinner? Should
I
I
saw
sit?"
that in the book. Yes.
Those are
Yeah.
real things. Those are real. I'm just like,
Yeah.
nah, I don't think this is, and
Mhm.
so being able to talk to Ross about it, and that's who we are. That's our relationship. And so being able to say that to her, and we did a couple of webinars for folks on how to be an ally and what allyship really is. And from that, Courageous Discomfort was born.
That's so great. It's such a meaningful book, and I really appreciate it the way that it's set up, asking specific questions and diving in. I was worried when I first started reading one of them because I was like, oh no, they're just going to tell me that this is a question and not the actual answer. Like they're going to tell me the mistakes, but not the answer. And as somebody who is all about tough conversations, since that's what I do, I was like, I'm hoping they're going to tell me what should have been said in the situation. Like, for example, the one that you just gave when, your friend, who you love, it was part of your church group, that they, did say those words, and to your credit, like say, yeah, to their best intention, but they went in the wrong direction. So for those who are listening right now who are like, and give that up, please, what would you have preferred? That, I mean, I know the answer from the book, but that's sort of cheating. So what would you say would have been something that you would want somebody to say to you in that situation, that would have been received better, and not that kind of, I know, sort of in the back of your mind going, that doesn't feel right. Like, I get what she's trying to do, but that doesn't feel right. What would you have preferred happened?
Just simply saying, "What I'm seeing right now, I know you're seeing, and it absolutely sucks."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just starting there, and
Yeah.
then being able to entertain a dialogue instead
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we do when people are grieving. It's like, this is what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to send you flowers, but I don't want to come to the house. I don't want to sit in the sadness, in the grief,
Wow.
I just want to drop off the casserole. I don't want to come in. You know what I
I
mean?
hear you. I
And so,
hear you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, I just had an experience actually, Shanterra, a couple of days ago. It's really interesting as a white person. And I'm also somebody that people have asked uncomfortable questions about parenting and kids and teenagers and racism and homophobia, I mean, stuff, for a long time. But writing this book has given me a lens that I didn't have before, to have mostly white people ask me somewhat similar questions that Shanterra is describing, or say similar things. And so, although I've been doing this work in variations on the theme for so long, a couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with a woman that I don't know well, who knew I had written, she couldn't quite remember what I had written about, but she was like, "Oh, wait, what was that book that you wrote?" And I said, "It's, Courageous Discomfort, How to Have Brave, Life-Changing Conversations About Race." And she started talking to me about that her family, she had found out that her family had slave owners in her family. And she was talking about her feelings about that. But here's the thing that happened. And I'm not even going to look at Shanterra when I say this.
Should I look at Shanterra?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Is that, so she said her, and I mean that, and her logical step of what was the appropriate thing to do was to reach out to a very prestigious Black professor at a university who, let's assume, is extraordinarily busy, and ask them what she should do. And she looked at me as if this was the answer. And I had this moment. See, now I'm looking down at Shanterra.
Yeah, me too.
I had this moment. So Shanterra, I've even told you this conversation, right? So I look at her and I say, "So here's a suggestion that I'd really like for you to consider. I'd like for you to consider Googling reparations, white people, slave owners and their families, because there are a lot of people in this country who are doing that work. And so you do that work, and then you figure out the things that you need to do, because this professor that you think is doing, this professor is very, very busy. So I really am strongly suggesting to you that you do that instead of contacting this professor." Mm-hmm. And what was so interesting about that was that first, and I'm not saying this to be snarky about this woman, it's literally white privilege in action. She was completely befuddled. It had never occurred to her that this woman, this professor, should not be the person that she reaches out to. And it didn't occur to her to do the work, because what she perceived was that her work was actually reaching out to this professor. And I looked at her, I was watching her face as she went through this thing of confusion, of non-understanding, and of me then sort of the second time saying, "This professor is very, very busy. So you really need to do the work first, because there are a lot of people doing this work that you are interested in." So it's an interesting place to be, where I haven't had those kinds of conversations. Mm-hmm. And that I really have not had. And writing this book with Shanterra has given me the opportunity to really see from a different lens how racism works in more complicated ways, like you're describing right now.
Yes. And I think that that was very clear from reading the book, that your eyes were opened as well during it. I definitely felt that. Yeah. I would love to get a baseline, because there's a common misconception that parents often say, I hear often enough that I feel like it's a theme, that they want their children not to see color. That's like a very big deal to them, right? Like, because the intention is good. They're certainly saying it because they don't want their kids to be racist. Okay. So, but I don't want my kids to see color, or even my kids don't see color. So what should the aim be as a baseline for parents when it comes to teaching kids about race? Parents who want their kids to be accepting and kind and open-minded and definitely not racist, what should they be saying instead, or striving for instead?
The latter. What you just said is, I want my kid to be kind and accepting and loving and not racist. Like that. And it's because the whole idea of not seeing color means I see you. I see you and I'm uncomfortable with what I'm seeing right here. And so I'm going to not focus on that, which in turn means I'm going to give the impression that that who you are isn't important. Mm-hmm. And that is what I think is not what parents really want to do. I grew up, as we probably all did on this call, and there are a lot of people listening. I grew up in the age of color blindness. Like it was taught, and when white people said that, they usually said it to people of color. Usually, right? So they weren't saying it to each other. They weren't saying, when I see you, I don't see color, white person, because you look just like me. But I'm saying it to a person of color and giving them the impression that I'm not racist. And really all that says is, I see you, but what you are, who you are, I don't want to get caught up in that. So let's ignore that. Let's put that to the side. And that perpetuates racism. So it's not this idea of being colorblind. There's no such thing. And young people are not blind. They're not crazy. So they're also looking at us like, so you saying we don't see this person that clearly does not
this person is not Black?
Yeah, this person that does not look like me. So we don't see them. And so they're totally confused. And I get it. I get it, right? And so I think being able to see someone's race and see them and also value who they are and also see what's happening in our society to people of color. And so there's a way to teach children, to teach young people, you do know that this person was killed because of their skin that we see. You do see that this person was mistreated at the department store because of the color of their skin that we see. So being intentional about that instead of being intentional about erasing someone's identity.
I think that I think for white parents and for parents who are not coming from minorities that have a history of oppression in our country, that so I'll speak for myself, even as a Jewish person, that I can say, I get to choose if I see you or don't see you, but the Black person does not get to choose because that's the world they walk around in. And so when we say we don't see color, what I really hear and what I want white people to understand is that we have a choice and other people don't. And the reason they don't is because of racism. And because of other people seeing someone's color and thinking they should be degraded, dismissed, demeaned because of it. So it's a really important thing to say to yourself, all good intentions of how I was raised, actually not really helpful. And my judgment about whether that's helpful or not is not as important as the person who's receiving the actions, right? Which are people of color, Black people who've been systemically oppressed. And so I think we need to listen more. Like our experiences matter, but we really need to balance them against the history of what some people are telling us. And that's more important. We have a story in the book of Shanterra explaining like how dangerous it is when people say, I don't see color, in her personal experience. And I think that's just a really good example of how different, I think, because of race, we operate in the world.
Yeah. I think when people say it, it gives this idea that I'm safe and I'm okay. When
a
white
person, you mean?
A white person saying it, that means it's sort of the way of saying, I'm an ally. And I tell white people, listen, when you say that to me, that doesn't give me the impression that you're safe. Actually, I want to put up a wall. Because if you are leading with, I'm safe, I'm a good person, all of that, nah. Because for me, it's like, keep listening. Pay
Right.
attention to what they're doing. And this whole idea of being colorblind isn't real. It isn't real when it comes to racism in this country. And so as well-intentioned as I think people can be, the intention is really saying, I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear what you're dealing with. I don't want to, I don't want to pay attention, because also what happens is the exceptions. So we in our country, we deal with the model minority. And so I can count, oh my gosh, I don't know how many times I've heard, you speak so well.
Oh, right.
Right?
That's a microaggression,
It's
right?
definitely a microaggression, you know, you're so eloquent. And if I say to a white person, oh, you speak so well, it doesn't sit well, because then a white person will like, what do you mean?
What do you
Right?
mean? Are you saying because I'm blonde? Is it because I'm a woman?
Exactly.
Am I young?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so I often think when you hear yourself, when you hear what you're saying, and so saying, oh, I don't see race, or you know what, even though you're Black, you speak so well, or you've gone to college, or you've written a book, or and it's just like, really?
Yeah.
Is
No,
that
I
what
hear that.
Yeah.
That makes
So I want
a
to
lot
put
of sense.
I want to put 2 points to things. One is of what Shanterra said. One is when you say something like, as an ally, it's sort of equivalent in my mind when someone says, to be honest, or I'm going to be honest with you. Because why do you need to say that? Right? Like, you really don't. Like, as soon as someone says, if you're listening to this, as soon as someone says, I'm gonna be honest with you, don't you think to yourself, why are you saying that? Like, does that mean that
what's been the previous? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Right.
Not so honest.
So I sort of see them as a little bit equivalent, right?
That's
Like,
good. Yeah.
you're signaling like what's a very complex thing going on with the person who's speaking. Second thing is, and Robyn, you talked about like, what are some like really concrete things? Like we are not, both of us are educators, and we have very strong opinions, and we're social emotional learning experts. So we focus highly on like what to do, right? Here's a problem, what to do. You don't have to take what we're saying as like the truth, but we got strong opinions about how we think we should be in the world. Right. And we want to make it better. We want to contribute to making it better. So when if you're hearing, well, okay, what do I say? If somebody like really moved, if I'm in a meeting and that person is Black and they said something that really moved me, or like they did an amazing job with it, like, well, what do you say? Because you can't say, oh, you're so well spoken, because then that will come across as racist or a microaggression. You can say, like, that point you made, and say specifically what the point was that you thought was really, like a good point. They made a great argument. If you're specific about this one point, then that changes, right, the nature of how you're coming across, and it's a much more effective way to communicate. And frankly, it's a much better way to communicate with anybody, right? If because there's lots of reasons why that can come across wrong to a lot of different people. So if you want to make a point to somebody that they've done a great job in articulating something, just be specific about what they've said that meant something to you.
I think it's all really good. Yeah.
And I know we have to move on, but I will also say to what Ross just said, that also means that we have to deal with our biases, and we have to deal with the messages that we've been told and taught, and we have to deal with our internal messages that's been going on. So if you don't expect a person of color, a Black person, to speak well, or to be eloquent, or to be educated, then that's something we have to deal with. If you don't expect, someone who doesn't look like you to be able to give a good point in a meeting, that's something that you have to deal with. And that's not the responsibility of the person of color.
Right. That's
not their responsibility to show you, what? For the longest time, I didn't know Black people could speak well. That's not to that, because that Black person gonna look at you crazy, and they're gonna, all these mental gymnastics going on. Because if they then say, "Are you kidding me?" then HR is involved, and it's a whole long thing, right?
Right.
So,
very messy.
Or we just say, "Wait, why did not expect them to be able to do well? Why did I not expect them to live in this neighborhood? Why did not expect them to, to go to this college or university? Why did not did I not expect them to be at this restaurant with me, or this in this shopping center with me, or in this mall with me? What is going on with me that I did not expect it, that it is a surprise when it happens? And as we're talking to our children, it's like, well, why don't you expect people to be in your classrooms who don't look like you? What is the history of this land that the school is built on? What has been the history of the administration? What has been because then it becomes like, wait a second, I have to teach before I send my young person off to this school. So if they're just surprised, why is it that we're still having, teachers who don't look like anybody in the school and they're hired for the first time at the school? What has been going on? So that when my child gets in the car, it's like, oh, Miss McBride, said this today. Well, why is that a surprise? Or why didn't you want to go to her office? Or so that's the stuff that we have to do. That's the work before engaging with another person of color, or as we engage with the person of color.
This has been so interesting already, of like so many things swirling in my head. It's reminding me of, I this last weekend, we went to an art museum and they had a whole thing on, it was an entire exhibit on African-American art. And many of them were incorporated lists of people who were killed by the police. So that made for a interesting conversation. My son happens to be very justice minded. That is a thing about him. He notices things, he wanted to know more information. I was telling him that young boys, practically he's 12. So I was like, not around your age, went to get candy from a store where this man was jogging in a neighborhood and was killed. Why? Because of the color of his skin. And we got to talking about that, and he does tend to see a lot of things that he thinks this is racism. Often it is. You have a chapter in your book where you're talking about, is it always about race? And that I wrote in a note above it to ask you about this, because he came home yesterday. So at dinner time, he said to me that a boy who was white flipped off another boy who was black. And he said he's racist. And so, and knowing that this has been on his mind, we just went to the art museum. We've had these conversations. It's very fresh. So I know nothing about this other child. I don't know anything about these children. And I don't know what has happened before or after or in between. I just know this one thing. So this is probably a common situation that happens. So I'm curious from you, when a parent hears that from their child, that's racist, or that was racist, what is our response to be in that situation so that it is a productive conversation? It's not pushed off, but it's also not made like, yes, that was racist, because that may not be. So what is how are we to respond in that situation?
That's a great, Robyn, that's a great question, because it's so multi-layered. There's so much going on there. Like, can I unpack a little bit, Champ?
I would like you to unpack. Yes.
Unpack it. Well, I mean, because
I'm asking for everybody, but hey, it happens in my house.
Right. So. Right. And they're always teaching us, right? I mean, so first of all, you have the particular character of your child who is, and young people more so than others, but they go through, especially at this age, like they are very trying to figure out what is right and wrong in the world. And also what is wonderful is that they get galvanized by that. They see things that are wrong and they want to do something about it, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. And they need their parents who are guiding them along the way, because in their enthusiasm and their passion, things can get very complicated for people around them and for them and for themselves too. I mean, there's all different kinds of iterations of how things get complicated, but it's important for them to process their feelings and be able to process like what they do know and what they don't know. And I think one of the things that's important for a parent, and this is so you got the character of the child and where they are developmentally, but you also have a parent who it's really understandable that these things really push our buttons, and parents have a real need to have an answer in those situations. And we are driven to have a certainty and an answer. And we think we have to provide certainty to young people at all times. What they need certainty in is our emotional equilibrium, or our ability to come back, right? And say, what you do in your podcast all the time, Robyn, is what you're talking about. Basically, is like, how do we maintain our equilibrium? And parenting can get us like really up and down. So I think the most important thing is also tracking your own first response to this, right? So you don't ask a million questions. You don't make you don't start making assumptions. You don't think that you need to go call the school right away. Like all of those things. It is, to my mind, it is asking your child a few questions, not 10, about why they perceive that. And also being able to say, there's a possibility, which I think in this case, so Shanterra, tell me what you think about this, obviously, is that he doesn't know, right? Those kids could just be really angry at each other. Or, that kid, it could have been racist. Or based on race and racism. It could have been on that they are really good friends and got into a fight, and that's the way they, said goodbye to each other, right? That was and in fact, for boys, because boys are complicated with the way that they, come back together again, they could have gotten into a really big fight, and actually flipping each other off could have been like their way of getting back together again.
We're good. Yes.
So, right. Like we're good. So there's all different kinds of ways. And I think that the most important is to be asking your child, why do you think so? And also, if you were in a situation with somebody where somebody was being racist, where you decided that was happening, what do you want to do? Like, what do you think? And then having that's the conversation I think we have to have. Not, we have to have certainty. I have to understand what's happening. I have to go to the school and complain. It is slow your roll and really focus on your kid and understanding how he's processing what he's seeing.
Yeah.
What do you think,
totally
Shanterra?
agree.
How'd I do?
I totally agree, because I think we don't know what the kid did. We don't know the situation. We don't, right? And so I think for a lot of times there are people under the umbrella of being allies who will jump way
totally
who will jump in and make it a thing, and it's not a thing. And so the 12-year-olds are like, wait a minute, I was saying bye. Like that's what we were doing.
It's, you think it's rude, but that's the way I say bye.
That's our love language. That's what we do.
Exactly.
And so I think it's really, but I will say I love the lens of justice. I love the lens of looking at like, that's wrong.
Yeah,
this is wrong. Right.
That is him.
Right.
That is him.
That is wrong.
Right.
And you don't want somebody, giving somebody the finger just because.
Right.
That part either. So it's also understanding, so it's really being curious, like, what happened? What do what happened with them? Or why do you, what happened? Mm-hmm. And so if it's just, well, that person's Black, and so they're not supposed to do that. Yeah, but what happened? Mm-hmm. Like what happened during the day? Do you know what happened? Because something could have happened in math class or in science, and this is their opportunity to get back. Or like what Ross said, they're saying goodbye for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Weird love language. Weird.
I do think that my son does not think highly of the person who did the flipping. So, and so there's an additional lens there.
Yes, sure.
I certainly did get that.
Absolutely.
But so if we were to take it further and let's step back for a minute and look a little bit wider. So there's a lot of talk about allyship right now. And so if we are wanting our kids to be allies, what does that really look like in a school situation? What kind of situations would there be that would promote allyship, that would make it so somebody should step up in some way, because as you talk about in your book, that allyship is not just being sympathetic. That's not the beginning and end of allyship. There's more to it. So if we are to help our kids become allies, what does that really mean in a real live school situation?
Well, what I would really like is for white parents who are not, black and brown. So I'm including my people. I'm including Jewish people in this. That we have to know and I want parents to make the assumption that their children have seen racist comments on their feed or in their group chat, that they have participated in some way in those racist group chats, jokes, whatever, that their children are confused about using the N-word, for example, because they have white friends who have said, it's fine, we listen to it on the music, or it's a way to prove that they're sort of in, or something like that. I want parents to assume that their children are in the mix of racism, and that it is complicated, and that our children, I'm including mine in this, our children sometimes do things that we are like, no way, there's no way our kid would do that. And the more we talk in generalities about race and racism, or the more that we fight on being able to talk about it in schools in ways that are thoughtful, self-reflective, substantive, right? That the more that we fight those things, the more our children are going to be in this world of this amount of racism and not have the skills and not know our values about where we stand and have the skills to be able to do something about it. And I will tell you, as a parent of two white boys, that I've had plenty, and this is, and I think this is a really hard thing about parenting, and this is not the clean, perfect answer, right? That I think we sometimes think that we're looking for. As a parent, I can be in control of, if I'm hearing somebody say something racist in a carpool, in my house, something like that, and they're my friend and they're my kids' friends, I can say, and have said, have no problem saying, hey, that you're saying right now, you're not saying it. And I only can control my house or in my car, but you have to know, love you. You're in my house, you eat my food, love you. And because of that, I'm holding you to a standard, not a high standard, by the way. Let's not say that being anti-racist is like a high standard. It is a decency, dignity standard of, this is not happening. And I don't care if you hear it among other families. I don't care. And because I love you, you're my kid's friend. This is not happening. This is the standard I hold you to. So I have control over that. And I think we absolutely have the responsibility to say that, regardless if our children think that's embarrassing, because it is fine for us to do things that are embarrassing when we are showing our values about upholding other people's dignity. So it's fine if our kids are embarrassed about that. That's what we should be putting our foot down about. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, with our children, when our children are in these really complex social dynamics, for them, and this is the conversations I've had with my own kids, where they have had to learn, but they have been silent when I've wanted them to speak out, that I live in Colorado. There's a lot of racism against Mexicans here. A lot of jokes, a lot of horrible things that were really hard for me to learn about because I wasn't raised here. So when my kids say to me, yeah, this thing happened, and I say, well, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? And they say, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to say anything. Because Mom, I don't want to do it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And for me to be able to say, okay, in this situation, I do want you to, can we talk about maybe what could possibly you could say? So the next time it happens, you are more prepared, but taking off the pressure on that moment, which is not a perfect answer, right? I want them to say something. I want them to be like your kid, like your son, to be like, that's wrong, right? Like I want them to do that. And I know that if I push them and push them and push them, that they're not going to talk to me about this ever again. And that there's no room for discussion and for a process for them to learn how to speak out. So I know, parenting expert that I am, I know that my children have not said things or done things that I have wanted them to do in situations that have called for it. And my hope is, my expectation is that as they get older, and as they are getting older, that they are making decisions and learning to speak out through the process.
Yeah. I think part of raising young people to want to be allies is meeting them where they are. And a lot of times they're just like adults. There are adults who like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Or, the summer of 2020 happened. We're in 2023. So everything's fine, right? Like the pandemic is over. We're all back to work. We're all back to doing what's normal. Mm-hmm. And I think understanding that young people are feeling the exact same way. Young people are seeing, and they're wanting to operate just like adults. And unfortunately, there was no timeline. There is no timeline to when this, and I want to say systemic racism in America isn't over, and so, but meeting young people where they are and understanding they're still developing, and understanding they're not going to always see the inequity when it comes to their school. They're not going to always see the racism when it comes to school boards. They're not going to always see what's happening in their schools, on their sports teams, on their dance teams. They're not going to always see it. And so as we are wanting them to speak up and to be allies and to risk losing something, to sacrifice losing something, to sacrifice making school aware, we got to also understand that they're still developing and they may not want to do it. Young people don't want to lose anything. They don't want to sacrifice anything. They don't, and so
it's scary. It's so scary.
It's very scary. And
that doesn't make them racist, right? Like, right. I mean, like, right.
It doesn't make them
racist. It makes them 13. Doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't. It's, we are on a process of handling difficult things, which means we got to give each other some grace along the way, right? So when kids who are 13 say something racist and it's caught on social media, God forbid, and then the whole community says like, oh my gosh, like what a terrible child and what terrible parents and everything. Yeah. That is not an opportunity. That is not the situation in which people who have made this mistake are given the space to be able to do better. They just understandably get more defensive and more hunkered down. So we're not saying like, don't hold that child accountable, but do it in a way that doesn't create immense amounts of shame and feeling like he doesn't belong in his community, because we've got to be able to do that work. We gang up on people so quickly. Yes. And the only thing it does is makes us feel like temporarily self-righteous. And then, someone's going to come around to us one day, right? I mean, like,
if there is a desire or space to recognize what happened wasn't right, because I think this whole we got to give each other grace is really great. As I preach and as someone who is
I learned that from Shanterra,
right? someone who proudly puts on this identity of being a Christian, right? And this whole idea of, well, I need to extend grace. I do. I really do. And I need to also pay attention to see if grace is being sought. Because if this idea of, that person made a mistake, and if that person acknowledges that's a mistake, and then they do it again, okay, all right then. So I'm gonna tell you once again that calling me that is not cool. Or recognize that, okay, I hear you, great. And then a week goes by and you do it again. It's like,
no, and then you're in a situation where this person clearly is thinking, I'm not taking the principles of this community seriously. So there's got to be some common sense between, like, you make one mistake, but when parents are saying that can't be my kid, I've always said, the minute you say that kind of stuff, it is your kid. And it's much more likely. The more you say it's not my kid, it's not my community, that means you're not willing to see what's in front of you. Yeah. And the more you're not willing to see what's in front of you, the world's going to show you more and more and more. Yeah, it is.
So if we turn the tables and it's now not your kid, it's your grandfather, who is
Oh.
at the holiday table, and you've been taught to respect those who are older, who know more, who have had tough things in their lives, have had experiences. And you're at the table, your kids are at the table, they're at the table, metaphorically and physically. And your grandfather says, well, back in my day, and then says something demeaning and racist. And then somehow with like, well, I don't mean anything by that. It's just the way it was. Yeah. And your kids are watching and listening right in that moment. What is the don't do that and say that? And what is the do say that and do that in that very uncomfortable real life situation?
Yeah, I think it's important to be who you want to be and be who you want your kids to see. Mm-hmm. I think it's totally safe in saying, you know what, Grandpa, that's true. Back in your day, we're in a new day, and I am teaching my children this, or I'm teaching my children to treat everyone with dignity. Mm. But what I want to acknowledge what you just said, back in your day. And that's fine. You don't have to dismiss Grandpa. You don't have to make Grandpa feel like dust. You don't have to do any of that. You can simply be who you want to be in front of your children and say, not cool. This is what we are going to treat everyone with dignity. And then even if family members say, yeah, but they're not here. We're here. We're only, we're with each other. There's no one here. And then you can say, even if they're not physically here in this room, I'm teaching my children to treat everyone with dignity. What was just said is not treating everyone with dignity. That's it. That's all. That's it. You don't have to have an argument. You don't have to fight. You don't have to make a scene. You don't have to make a big deal. You can just say, I want to treat everyone with dignity, and I want my children to see that, period.
I like the period. And excellent. Yes.
And if they keep pushing at you, because, we have our families love
you're
to push
so
at us,
sensitive,
right?
But you're so sensitive. And
why are you making such a big right? And
why
so
are you
what
making
you
such a big
say
deal?
is,
what's going on?
Yeah. So what you do is you say, you take a breath and you say, you know what? I'd love to have this conversation with you later. So is after dinner a good time? Because I don't want to be, taking away from the good hard work that people did to put this food on the table.
Thank you. As the person who's making the food.
Exactly.
All day long with the food.
You turn to the person who did with the food and you're like, is that okay with you?
Yes.
Yeah. But it's because what happens is people take advantage of how upset we get. And then also maybe the lower position of power or in the hierarchy of the family. And that gives gives the ability to even more dismiss, demean what is being said. And when you're feeling demeaned is when it's when people start getting like really riled up. So it's really important to have control over yourself in that situation by saying, I do want to have this conversation. When you say it like this, I do want to have this conversation with you, but not right now, because I want to take away from the work that this person did, put this food on the table. When is a good time for you? And that's the face. It's not like in your face and it's not passive. It's like, when's a good time for you? Because I really would like to know. And that is the way your children need to see you, which is competent, confident, handling. That is what they need. And the other thing I would say is that afterwards with your kids, you can say to them, I want you to respect the position of a grandfather. It's really important to me that you respect those kinds of positions. But when people within those positions are taking away the dignity of other people, you don't have to respect those actions.
Oh, that's good stuff right there. Taking the behavior out and highlighting that behavior over the person.
Right. You got some crazy uncle who just loves to get at you. You're like, you know what? Uncle's really important. It's really important in a family, and you know what? Sometimes people are complicated. Uncles can be complicated. So in general, respect that position when they're saying things that take away the dignity of other people by, by making fun of them, demeaning them, that's not actions you need to respect.
What do you say? You say you're don't be hard on people, be hard on ideas. That's what you say.
Exactly.
Yes, that's a good illustration of that. Okay, give me your top tip. If you could leave us with one tip to make sure that we are getting what you really need us to get from courageous discomfort, what would it be?
I would say read the book. And that's
Good
the
idea.
first tip.
Yes.
That's the first tip. But I would also say, when it comes to, and I'm glad you brought up be easy on people, hard on ideas. That was the hardest part for me to write and for me to sit with. And I think that when we really understand what it means to be easy on people and hard on ideas, the understanding that people are trying, especially if you know they're trying. And so I would really just strongly meet people where they are as they are trying. Keep being uncomfortable, keep being, and I think we run from discomfort. We run from it. We want everything in our world to be easy and to be, it's not, that's not life. But
not everything's yoga pants.
Listen, which is my favorite piece of clothing. But
I figured you'd get that.
I understand. But just sit in the discomfort and just know that it's making our world a better place for everybody. But sitting in the discomfort is okay.
Thank you.
I want people to take away that, if you are running to or think that reading a parenting book is really important, Robyn, you've written wonderful books. I've written books. If you are somebody who loves and sees the importance of reading a parenting book because you really think that it relates to you and preparing for being a good parent, all that, I'm asking you to think about this book with the same sense of urgency, and that it will help your parenting in very similar ways as these parenting books, as good parenting books will. And I'd like for people to think about that with the same sense of urgency. If I need this, it's not summer 2020 passed. The issues are here and they affect you. Engage.
I agree with that. I ask questions on my professional Facebook page, and sometimes they get, just enormous amount of comments. And one of them I was asking about, what do you have an enormous amount of? And my answer was parenting books. And there have been a lot of talk underneath that. One person that caused a whole snuffle, kerfuffle, was a person who was like, if you need to read books, then you shouldn't have children. And I was like, because I'm always looking to learn more, to grow more, and never assume you know it all. So
right,
this is one of those areas that it's really important to dive into, because the book makes you think. And if you walk away from reading that book with having gone through some thought process on your own, to think about where your upbringing, how your upbringing influenced you, where you lived influenced you, how your stories, your interactions influenced you, that's good. You're making some progress. It's not, you're going to read this book and all of a sudden, boom, everything is perfection, but it will get you to think. And I'm so appreciative of it. Can you give us the resource of the week? Where can we go to get more information about you, your book, and your great work you're doing?
Well, Courageous Discomfort has its own website, courageousdiscomfort.com. And I have my website, rosalindwiseman.com. Shanterra, you want to say yours?
Yeah, it's two things. If you put in shanterramcbride.com, it will also lead you to marvelousuniversity.com. But I agree with Ross. I think courageousdiscomfort.com, where you can order the book from there. You can also get it on Amazon, but you can go to courageousdiscomfort.com. And it's also, I think, I've learned recently, there are a lot of people doing book clubs about the book. And on the website, we actually have book club questions to get people started. And, so I think it's a great resource for those who want, folks who want to learn more.
Yeah, this has been great. And for all those who are listening, you're running around, you're driving a car, don't worry, I got you. We will have show notes, and all of the links will be on those show notes.
And there's an audiobook with me and Shanterra.
Oh, there you go. You can listen to it in the car or while you're running.
That's right. If you yes, you can listen to more of us.
This is awesome. And I just want to thank you both for being on the show today, for talking to us about your book and about the background that brought you to the book, all of these great stories. And really your do this, not that is extremely helpful as we are courageously very uncomfortable, but that's okay. Courageous discomfort. That's what it's all about. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome, Robyn.
Well, I've got my takeaways, and sweet friends, I know you have yours. Let's discuss them. You can go up onto Facebook or the Dr. Robyn Silverman page. Let's chat about it. drrobynsilverman.com. I'm also on Twitter on Dr. Robyn, on Instagram under Dr. Robyn Silverman. I'm going to be going back and forth with Rosalind Wiseman, with Shanterra McBride. We are going to be talking all about this for the whole week. And also, I'm going to be creating memes with some of the amazing things that were said today. So slap those things right on the meme. You can deliver it all over the place. All of your followers can look at these great things because some things were said and you were like, hey, that's one of those ones that I want my uncle to see. Yes, let's do that. Let's put them up there. And if you will go to iTunes and rate and review this podcast, I'd so appreciate it. The more that you give those 5-star reviews, the more it gets out there, the more everybody knows about Rosalind Wiseman and Shanterra McBride and their amazing book and the great work that they did getting uncomfortable and writing it for all of us. Thank you all for the time we had today. My fellow parents, leaders, and educators, thank you so much for tuning in to How to Talk to Kids About Anything. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please go to drrobynsilverman.com. There's so many great podcasts up there, and the show notes to this podcast will be up there as well. I look forward to weathering the storms and enjoying the sunny side of life together. And please remember, even on the days when you fall short, you've got this. You're here, you're getting the information you need. I know it's not easy, but never forget, there's a tomorrow. Parenting often provides the ultimate do-over. So if you heard something, you did something, your kid came home and said something, you go, oh my goodness, after listening to this podcast today, I should have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I messed up. That's okay. You can go back and you could say, hey, I wish I said this instead. Can we have that conversation again? Can we engage in this again? Hey, Uncle Larry, I want to have this conversation that I shut down last Thanksgiving. Let's have that. I'm right there with you. And as there are moments when we doubt our know-how, our choices, and our sweet sanity, please know you are 10 times the parent you think you are. Until next time, this is Dr. Robyn Silverman with How to Talk to Kids About Anything. Please tune in again and keep connecting through conversation. See you next week.
You've been listening to How to Talk to Kids About Anything with Dr. Robyn Silverman. For more information on books, articles, speaking engagements, or curriculum, please visit drrobynsilverman.com.